Hello, and welcome to Bridgeford Trust Company's Delivering Direction and Control podcast series. Our podcast series is designed to educate, challenge, and inspire listeners while keeping you updated on developments regarding modern trust law and powerful planning opportunities available, all in an effort to deliver direction and control to clients and their advisors.
Hello, everybody. This is David Warren, co-founder of Bridgeford Trust Company and chair of our board, back with yet another episode of our podcast series. And I've been saying lately, it's humbling to me, just so many people are listening. And thank you for all the audience participation that we've been getting around the world. Every time we seem to go to conferences, somebody mentions the podcast, which is great. And we've been really lucky to attract some great talent over the last 50 or so episodes. And it's such a fun, probably the best part of my week when I get to interview thought leaders. And today is absolutely no different. I've been looking forward to this for a while, not just because Ralph is such an accomplished professional, but he's quite a character. We are kindred spirits of sorts. Jersey boys, grew up very close to one another, haunting the same Jersey Shore towns and Philadelphia bars. And it's amazing that we really didn't run into each other. We both were soccer players. I think our teams played each other in South Jersey. He was a lot better than me, probably. But no, he would have been enjoyable 25, 30 minutes together for sure. He's accomplished some amazing things in his career, but he may at one point break into song. He seems to do that a lot. So Ralph, you give me a little notice so we can cut that out. That would be great. Or a Rodney Dangerfield impersonation. You just don't know where this is going to go today. But Ralph, thank you for joining us. This is going to be great.
It's a delight and a pleasure to be here with you, David. And Bridgeford, I'm really pleased to be part of the show and happy to be on here discussing with you. And yes, we are kindred spirits for sure.
For sure. Goombas, right? Is that what they say in Jersey? Or Goombas, something like that. So a little bit about Ralph. He has such an impressive background. Of course, coming to California many, many years ago. He's president and CEO of Integrity Wealth Management. And that word integrity means a lot in exactly the way Ralph has built his practice, built his company, interacts with his clients. And I think it's really a touch point as to how and why he and I have become such good friends, because I see integrity is sort of a bit synonymous with independence and no conflict of interest. And that's very much what we talk about at Bridgeford all the time. So although we're new friends, we've become pretty quickly aligned in the way we look at the world. He's a Master of Science in Financial Services, which is not easy to get. Has some credentials behind his name, CHFC, yes, and CLU, and the whole alphabet of credentials, which means he has a lot of expertise in insurance, and that's a big part of his practice. He also has done some great volunteer work, which, Ralph, you don't brag about very much. I didn't realize this, how much you've done for the community. You founded the OC chapter of Advisors in Philanthropy, which I want to hear about, actually. I want to understand what that is. You were president of that for a couple of years, back 2012, and then on the international board for that organization, which must have been an incredible experience. So what you built and what you've done over the years, as I've been reading and getting to know you, is pretty special and pretty different. Leading you, as we'll talk about, to author a book, which has become pretty impactful, I understand. And you have a whole sort of paradigm and system to how you approach your practice. So again, thank you for being here. And why don't we begin with the work, the philanthropic work? Explain to me that organization, because I don't know a lot about it.
OCAIP, Orange County Advisors in Philanthropy. It was birthed. I was on the board, as you referenced, the International Association of Advisors in Philanthropy. This is a group where financial advisors and allied professionals can feel comfortable in an arena talking about philanthropy, because generally speaking, it was the PPP, the Partnership for Philanthropic Planning, formerly the Plan Giving Roundtable. They were where we could migrate to get our fill of the conversation and narrative, to be able to use the philanthropic, tax code. But we were really outsiders. Financial advisors weren't the core members of that group. And then if you moved over to the Association for Fundraising Professionals, you were talking to business development people. These were folks who were doing development work for the nonprofits and the charities. And again, we were misfits in that organization and community, although we have a high degree of interest. And the interesting part, David, as you know, is the very donors to those nonprofit organizations are our clients. Your firms, my firm, and all the allied firms around. and there was no core agenda that was directed to the financial advising community, to the trust officer community, to the accountants, to the attorneys. And so the International Association of Advisors in Philanthropy had a national conference on this very topic, but it didn't really have a community around the country where people could come and learn on a regular basis and a more periodic basis as opposed to once a year at a conference. And so I was part of the committee for the development of chapters. And I'm proud to say that Orange County is the first chapter of its kind in the country when it launched in 2012. Yeah, and it still runs successfully today. You can get to ocaip.org. The mantle has been handed off, the baton has been picked up, and folks are running with it. There's a lot of quality professional leadership and thought leadership there. They've had a who's who in terms of folks that have come to speak to that group. And it's geared for those that are in the financial community and the allied communities so that they can speak about the topics their very clients are interested in and probably underserved. Every year, I believe it's Citibank that does the study and finds that there's an under deliverance of all of the information that these folks, our clients, their donors, are looking for to understand how to use the philanthropic tax code in advantageous ways, doing well by doing good.
It's first again, congratulations for the thought leadership and what you did there. And I agree. I mean, when I was before starting Bridgeford, I became pretty enamored in the philanthropic space at Bank of New York Mellon. And I read a book by Claire Claire Gaudiani, who talked about how the United States is wildly philanthropic. We just don't realize it. The most philanthropic nation, and some people consider it the fourth arm of government because it's so powerful, it's so well funded, but not always well organized collectively, and particularly with the information dissemination. So it's what you've done.
Yeah, you hit on two things. One, the fractured elements of the philanthropic community. At last count, and this is old and stale data, there's 1.2 million nonprofits. You think, wow, how's that? The ones we know about are the hospitals or the universities with hospitals. They're the ones that have done really well. But the other 1.190 have not thrived in the same way that the universities have thrived. The faith-based institutions have thrived. Many of them are hurting to meet their budget every year, and it's very interesting how these are birthed. These nonprofits, it's usually a passion. Something affected a family member. Something affected their situation. They grew up homeless, and now here they are with a shelter taking care of homeless because they made it out. And so it becomes very close and very personal, and it is very fractured, which is interesting. But you hit on something north of us, and just north of the border here in Canada. For every dollar the U.S. gives, they're lucky to 25 cents is developed in their nonprofit arena per capita. And why is that? Because our philanthropic tax code incentivizes that. We recognized as a country that much of this work was better off being done in the private sector than done by the government. And so, how could we drive that was the thinking behind the philanthropic tax code when it was initiated.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Before we get into your practice, one other point I was thinking when you were talking is what struck me when I became pretty passionate about the philanthropic piece, and this was in Pennsylvania, I was still in Pennsylvania, was how these nonprofits compete with each other for money. So you have, let's say, two women's shelters, right, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they're chasing the same dollars, trying to serve the same demographic. And Claire Gaudiani her thesis was really strong to say, look, you got to get, this isn't a competition for this money. You got to organize around causes and then consolidate, and do what you can instead of fighting for the money, because there's plenty of money. That's what we just said. There's lots of money. But so we shouldn't be having nonprofits be in competing mode over that. And that was very interesting too. That was her whole push, was to sort of get some of these causes consolidated under one roof. So there was one ask, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And unfortunately, David, it's my experience that enlightened approach is rarely ever pursued. They unfortunately do see it as a zero-sum game, and what we get, you don't. What you got, we didn't, and they don't see the collaboration that's possible amongst that. It really it's a shame in many ways because they are serving some of the same constituents, and yet that crossover is like, whoa, we're not comfortable doing that.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations for what you've done. I was really impressed.
Yeah, it wasn't by myself. It was Orange County Community Foundation that helped anchor that. A couple gentlemen, Jeff Swanson and Mark Percy, they were two formidable forces along with me. That we were three legs of a common stool, and we managed to get that organization launched. And once it got launched, boy, it took off
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic.
for good reason. Yeah.
Making a difference is what we're trying to remember to do as we go through our lives. We got to make a difference here. And I also think you're making a big difference in the way you run your practice as well. I've paid attention to our conversations, sometimes over glasses of wine, I will note. And but we've had some pretty in-depth conversations about the way you have built your practice, which to me is very unique. And I have the great fortune of working with high-end asset managers, planners all over the world now. And a lot of it's just you hear the same words, same buzzwords. Then I come across you, and you talk about things in a different way. And I want to launch you into talking about the way you approach your clients and your client education. But I want to begin with a quote that I saw from you on your website that I love. You said on your website, like the pilot says, if you don't arrive safe, we don't arrive safe. Failure is not an option. Why don't you start there? Because I love that quote.
Yeah, it means to say clearly that our clients, along with us, the stakeholders, we are on a shared journey and in a shared future together. We truly mean that, like the pilot says to the passengers, as we say to our clients, if you don't arrive safe, we don't arrive safe. We're in this together and we must make it to the end together. Failure is not an option. Just isn't.
I love it. I love it. We'll keep going. Yeah. So we got.
Well, cracking the code, which we like to think with what we've developed in our process, the WealthTrac system and the WealthTrac formula, it came about by intensely listening to making the client's voice the voice we listen to. And as long as we did that, it became easy. Because if you study all of the surveys that go on year after year, in fact, the Spectrum Group is popular for this. They studied what are clients expecting from their financial advisors and how are they receiving it. And what is really interesting, the bar for what they're expecting is way across the page, and what they're receiving is short. And they're wondering where to get this and how do we get it. And I thought I would get that from my financial advisor. I thought I would get that from my financial team. And no one's really listening to what the clients are needing. And once you put your ear to the track and listen to what they need, and you actually take those surveys seriously, then you start to fill in. Well, geez, we not just we have this saying here. We don't want to just be a trusted advisor. We want to elevate to be the first call advisor. And being a first call advisor requires, I call it the 4 R's. You got to be resourceful, you got to be relevant, you got to be responsible, and you better be responsive. If you deliver on those 4 R's, where you are a resource for them and their first thought, oh, who do I call? Do I call David? Yeah, David probably has an answer to this. And if he doesn't, he's got 1 or 2 phone calls away to find an answer for me.
Well, what I love about that, if I could jump in, is, we were talking about this before we started, is having that one call trusted advisor is so essential. And I see it because of my anecdotal sort of experience across the country. And there's so many times people come to us through our website who've seen a video or a podcast, sophisticated family, a lot of wealth, a lot of great building of the business, but they don't have that first call. So they're looking at videos at 2:00 in the morning, and I'm humbled that they're calling Bridgeford. But I also scratch my head and think, well, gosh, this person's in his 60s and is built an empire, but nobody's told him about asset protection or how to be simple tax planning and kind of like where we began with the philanthropic space. I mean, it's amazing to me how much information is not in the hands of families. So your model is essential to be the first call, because in many cases, how else are they going to find out about some of this stuff, right? I mean, it's almost alarming.
It is. It is alarming. And hopefully there's more mouthpieces and voices that are beginning to echo and resonate, that we've got to level up as advisors, because the community, the clients have told us in survey after survey, they're being underserved. And the roadmap is right there for us. Do we want to be a first call advisor? And to be a first call advisor requires us to have our knowledge base expanded beyond just what our core strengths might be.
Perfect. Which is an excellent transition into your book, Integrity at Work, because I think it's really an extension of everything you're just saying, right? It's kind of the roadmap, right? So why don't you talk about that and how impactful that has been?
Yeah, the book's objective, David, was to define. I mean, wealth management is the term wealth management is bantered around a lot, and I always say I wonder, like, what is the definition of wealth management? It really started from my own studies. It started in the Far East, where Citigroup at the time was terming some of their divisions wealth management divisions, and they were talking about things that were going cross border, from not just their banking to their investment to their insurance planning, but it was going across all those borders and understanding it. So I kind of took the initiative and said, let's define it. If nothing else, let's define what wealth management means to us, so that the consumer can understand when we use that terminology, wealth management. Because
No, if I could just jump in, you make me chuckle, because when I was practicing law, I transitioned into the wealth management space, and really was a trust officer at a really large regional bank in Pennsylvania. And I chuckle with everybody. I'm like, what's this wealth management? Like, he just created a what does that mean? And so you've taken the time and the initiative to define it, which I love, which is really the thesis of your book, and I think it's excellent. But I think we're seeing this happen with family offices, right? Now everybody's a multifamily office, everybody's a family office. Same question. So what does that mean to you to be a family office? So maybe you need to write another book about what is a family office.
yeah, I mean, we define ourselves as all but a family office. We're not I can tell you what we don't get involved with organically here in the office. We're not attorneys, so we're not doing any legal work. We're not CPAs. We're not doing any accounting work, and by extension, we're not doing any bookkeeping. I say this tongue in cheek. We are not setting travel schedules. We are not meeting gardeners, and we are not walking dogs.
Not walking the dog. Fair
But
enough. All right.
everything else, financial, technically, we're around those conversations, and chances are we're initiating those conversations for clients.
All right, that's fantastic. I think it's fantastic. And to joke around a bit more about the nebulous definitions, in that uncertainty, those where failure is, because that's where I think the void develops. And I'll say it this way. Not to pick on one particular industry, but I have some, great friends in the insurance space who would call themselves a wealth manager, but they're not talking about anything but insurance solutions, right? And I don't mean to pick on them, and I know you do a lot of work in insurance, and I love insurance, and I think it's a huge part of our planning, but it's not the only part of planning, right? And so that's where the general high net worth family could get duped a bit and think, well, I have a wealth manager, and I'd like to say, well, no, you have an insurance guy that may not necessarily be a wealth manager, which is why these definitions are important, and I'm sure it's part of what you go through in your book, right?
Yeah, the book is a clear attempt at defining the 7 or 8 lanes that we should be driving in, and we should be going across those lanes and making sure they're integrated and they are synergistic. Oftentimes they're in silos, and oftentimes the providers are in their own silos. The portfolio manager is separate from the insurance expert, is separate from the risk management people, is separate from the tax advisor. And all of this has its place. I mean, every time you make an investment decision has a tax consequence. Every time you save a tax dollar, you're probably going to deploy it in investment. You can't escape it. And what you do with your wills and your insurance planning has implications for your legacy and estate plan.
Absolutely. And who's tying it all together? I mean, I've been really enamored, and why we started Bridgeford was where the industry has gone, right? So to your point, there's all of these moving parts, but they're not in kind of juxtaposition of each other. And so big bank trust departments will claim, well, we're wealth management. We coordinate all of this for you, which is a nice thing to say at a cocktail party, but there's so much conflict of interest that it makes that coordination at a bank that has all of these services, I think, problematic. A trust department, of private banking, insurance, asset management. I just think there's conflict everywhere. Then the model develops where, like Bridgeford, where there's an independent model where all of the things, Ralph, that you mentioned, including now trust services, can all kind of be bespoke. I love that word because is part of an overall plan, independent. So I love the lack of conflict of interest, but sometimes without, quote, the quarterback or what you've described as a wealth management person. So I love working with firms like yours, and what you're saying resonates with me because we need to be totally what's the you use the synergistic or whatever, simpatico. Is that even a word? Simpatico? I don't know.
Yeah, simpatico is, yeah.
Is that Italian? Is that Italian? I don't know.
It's got a vowel on the end.
It's got something on it. Anyway, my point is, I'm going down
Probably
this
Latin.
to point out that this separate, independent, equal, non-conflict such solution is resonating now. And when a family leaves, let's say, a Bank of New York Mellon, they're not going to Wells Fargo. They're coming to you to give them planning, to do asset management, and do what you do for them. And then they're looking for an independent trust solution like Bridgeford. And I love the new model. I love the new paradigm.
Yes, for sure. Clients sooner or later sniff out if there's a conflict of interest or if there's an agenda.
Yeah.
The agenda is what's important to the client. That's the agenda.
Absolutely. Which is even funny to me that we start to even say that, right? I mean, that's why I joked about it's a punchline at a country club. Oh, you mean, it's a novel idea to do what's best for the client. I mean, I don't mean to sound so sardonic about it, but it still surprises me that this is not common discussion, right? I mean, as a lawyer, of course you were always doing what was in the best interest of the client. And then I jumped into the financial services industry and loved it, but saw conflict everywhere. And I would get myself in trouble at times with senior management and say, no, I'm not going to support that. I'm not doing that. It's just clear conflict, and anyway, but what you're doing in your models is awesome. And I think it gets away from all of that. And the other thing that you do that I love, because Bridgeford has gone down that path, you've done it longer, is you've really harnessed the power of digital media. Using video work. I love the videos on the website. I wish it was somebody else speaking. I'm kidding. You do a very nice job. I know you have a very successful podcast, a series of your own. And I love that too, because that is a way and it has positioned you as the thought leader that you are. So talk to me about that. I mean, what got you into it? I mean, we love it. It's been great for Bridgeford, but I think it's unusual. It's still unusual for our industry to be harnessing that.
Well, now we've got our kind of our marketing hat on, right? And so there's a great book. I think Steve Novak wrote this book. I don't quote me on the author, but the book was called "Get Slightly Famous: How to Become a Celeb in Your Local Marketplace." It was essentially about how do you become a thought leader. And thought leadership, for this fellow's definition, he said there's the hub, you in the middle, and there's spokes that need to come off of this hub. Think about that. You need to be recognized as a thought leader by doing the following things: authorship, have a column, write a book, speak publicly, at the time it was pre-podcast, so that wasn't one of the spokes in the wheel. But what we're trying to do is get the word out. Get the word out. And the most important word we're trying to get out is integrity. That's what we interview all our guests about. They're thought leaders here and leaders in the business community and the nonprofit community, even in the political community. The mayor of Irvine was on. I'm delighted. I think we have a House of Representatives coming on as a guest, one of the members of the House here in the state. And so it's been interesting to have folks talk about what integrity has meant in their lives and how they've applied it, and when they've seen it not applied by others and how it went awry. So it's that's the narrative we want to follow, because if we just do things, do the right thing, even when no one's looking, that kind of works every time.
No, I love it. I love your message. From when I first met you, we had a lunch, and I think things just kind of went off in our minds and ways we could work together. I see us again, kindred spirits. I'm really impressed with what you've done with your career. You've had a lot of great success, and you're doing it the right way with integrity. And you should be applauded for that and what you do for your families, and your thought leadership. There's a fine line, right? There is, I'll use the word cheesy marketing, right, where people run around and put billboards up. Lawyers are notorious for this in the personal injury space. But we've taken the path to try to become semi-famous by being somebody that has the answer, like you said earlier, because that's the business we're in, is answering questions. All right. And trying to make people's lives work smoother. And so again, meeting you was great. And I see us doing some amazing work together, and really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And you're working on another book, as I recall, right?
Yeah, totally out of my lane.
Yeah.
totally out of my
About the Eagles?
professional
About the
lane.
Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, go Birds. For those
Right.
Eagles fans out here on the West Coast.
There'll be some, yeah. Well, once again, I'm here with Ralph Adamo. His company is Integrity Wealth Management. He's a highly respected person in all over Southern California, but also in the Northeast, and somebody that I for sure would recommend. So please look at his website, his videos, take a look at his book. It's extremely insightful, and keep them in mind for yourselves or your clients, as you need somebody to actually explain what wealth management is and then execute it. So Ralph, I'm thankful for you and our new friendship, and I hope we've already learned a lot from you in the last couple of months.
I'd give one plug, which is really a selfless plug in many ways. So on our website for the book, Integrity at Work, integrity fully spelled out, A-T, work, W-O-R-K, you'll find that we have Chapter 8 published there, which is it's kind of the roadmap to help separate noise from signal for the consuming public that's trying to figure out what a wealth manager is. Am I getting authentic, comprehensive financial advice from my current firm or the firm I'm seeking? There's 25 questions that are given there with examples of what you should be getting as answers to those questions when you ask yourself or you ask your advisory team. And I think that kind of is a great checklist roadmap for those that are investigating a relationship or a potentially new relationship.
No, I'm glad you said that. I mean, and that's excellent. I remember we talked about that a couple of times, and I think that's a brilliant idea too. We all need checklists, and I think that's a great way to approach it. So once again, thank you for our friendship and our, I know, future collaboration, and congratulations on your great success, Ralph. And look forward to it. Maybe meeting in Philly sometime.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Appreciate it, David. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks again for listening to Bridgeford Trust Company's Delivering Direction and Control podcast series. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast to keep posted on when new episodes are added. And for more information, you can visit us online at bridgefordtrust.com.